Guten Tag. If you're watching this, well done because you're all ready to revise for your higher writing exam. You've got 50% of German out of the way now, so your focus needs to be on writing and speaking. These two exams are fairly similar in the way that you have to revise for them. As I always say, you do need to know a lot of knowledge to be successful in your GCSEs, but you should also think strategically about how to pass each paper. For the writing exam, make sure you choose the essay that you know the most vocabulary for. The examiners are kind here, they give you a choice of 2 topics, so choose the one that you can write the most about. Memorize phrases at home and then you can write a checklist as soon as your exam begins. This way it's kind of like having your own answer sheet that you can refer back to throughout the exam. For the higher paper, if you start with question 2, that would be a really clever idea because it's worth the most marks, 28 marks. It also needs you to be very accurate and to use all of your best phrases in this question. If you break the translation down into grammar points, you've got more chance of getting the overall gist. Don't try and do it word by word because you know that German word order is very different to English. At the end of your exam, always reread your writing and check for common mistakes. By that I mean word order, especially if you've used words such as weil or das. Remember, they send the verb to the end. Check for tenses. Did you definitely use past tense? Did you definitely use future tense? And check that if you're writing in third person, you've remembered the rule about he or she cup of tea. The good news about the German writing exam is there are no tricks. The examiners simply want to see that you can use opinions in German, past tense in German, future tense in German, and of course aim high phrases because you're doing the higher paper. They also want to check that you understand German word order. So make sure you're really concentrating when you're writing time phrases or using words such as weil and das. If we have a look at the 2019 grade boundaries, which are a little bit harder than previous years, we can see that you would need 32 marks out of 60 to get a grade 7. So let's set 32 as our minimum amount of marks that we want to get. If I was doing this exam, I would complete it in the following order. I would start with question 2 because it's worth 28 marks, and I've got to make sure I'm using creative and complex writing. I would then move on to question 1. Question 1 is the crossover question. It's the one that you've practiced lots and lots of times in class. Even all the way back into year 9 you were practicing this question. It should be very easy for a higher candidate to get around 20 marks. Question 3 is a translation. I would probably leave this till last, and then I would read back over question 1 and 2 for mistakes before finally looking back at question 3 with fresh eyes. When I'm doing my final checks, the things I need to look out for are, have I definitely used opinions, past and future tense? Are they accurate? Have I used any what we like to call spiky words? So the words that are aggressive and send the word to the end of the sentence, for example, weil and das. If you've started a sentence with a time phrase, have you swapped the person and verb? So for example, instead of saying gestern ich habe, have you said gestern habe ich? If you've written about another person, have you put a T on the verb? Or if you've written about a group of people, have you put EN on the verb? If you're using past tense, have you used a g something word at the end of your phrase? And if you're using future tense, have you used just an infinitive at the end? And can you count lots of examples of aim high phrases? That's especially important in question 2, the creative and complex question. The best thing you can be doing to prepare for this exam tonight is to learn a checklist of phrases in German that will definitely get you high marks. I'm going to show you some of those phrases in this video. Remember, you can pause once the list of phrases appears and you can write down your favourite ones, the ones that are most memorable to you. I've made this sheet where you can collect them all in one place. You can download that from Aber now, or you can pick it up from me in school. Even on the higher paper, some of the marks will come from using the basics. So showing that you can give opinions, showing that you can give past tense, showing that you can give future tense. To stand out as a higher candidate, you can use some more interesting opinions. So not always relying on gut, or use some more interesting verbs. I'm going to show you some opinions now. Remember, you can always pause this and write down your favourite ones, and then when you finish watching this video, you can write them out over and over again to remember them for the exam. So, here are some negative opinions. Probably you all know ich hasse, I hate, but it would be really interesting to see some of you using things such as total sinnlos, stinklangweilig, gefährlich, es tut mir leid, something where you're really putting in a bit of attitude and a bit of emphasis. Here are some neutral opinions. So if you're asked about something and you want to say, well, it's not that I absolutely hate this thing, it just doesn't really interest me, you could use something like es ist mir egal. You've also got the generic phrases like wenn man mich fragt and meiner Meinung nach that all of us use pretty much every lesson in class. Here are some positive opinions. Remember, if you're going to use gern, gern is not a verb. It describes a verb. So you could say, ich spiele gern, ich esse gern, ich gehe gern, what else can we use? Ich sehe gern. Okay, so you've got to put your verb first, and gern goes in third place. And it's like emphasis. I happily do this. I really enjoy this. Again, try to use some of the more interesting ones as you're doing the higher paper and you want to show that there's a reason why you're on higher. Pause the video now and write down your favourite opinions. So now let's have a look at a model paragraph that uses opinions. This was taken from an examiner's report on a previous exam. So the bullet point says deine Lieblingsmusik, so your favourite music, and the student has written this. We can clearly see that they've used gern, so straight away, and this is a higher candidate, straight away we can see that they enjoy listening to pop music, they gladly listen to pop music. They've also got mein Lieblingsmusik ist, my favourite music is, and they've used weil and successfully sent the verb to the end, weil es immer sehr melodisch ist. What makes this kind of stand out is more than just a basic answer is that they've used things like immer sehr, it's always very. They haven't just gone for very simple answers. Here is another very high level paragraph which uses opinions. The examiners commented that this was an outstanding piece of writing and it was worth almost 4 marks on the 28 mark question. So notice, instead of just relying on weil and gern, this person has used phrases such as gefallen mir gut. Class trips are really pleasing to me, I really enjoy them. Instead of meiner Meinung nach, they've used ich bin der Ansicht dass, I am of the opinion that. And then they followed it up with this really nice phrase, I am of the opinion that the best thing about it is. So you could learn that whole expression, I'm of the opinion that the best thing about it is, and then you would just have to follow it up when you're in the exam. As a higher candidate, it's all about adding in extra little words such as intensifiers, qualifiers, and frequency adverbs. Remember, you can pause on these phrases and write down your favourite ones. So here are some intensifiers. These are words that you can put before adjectives, like very interesting, really exciting, probably boring. So you can learn some of these. You know the ones that we already know from class. They're the ones that other people will use. If you want to stand out, you're going to have to use the more interesting ones, like probably, or even really, echt. We don't talk about that one a lot. So if you put that one in your writing, you will stand out. Remember to pause so you can write down your favorites. We also have some fillers or qualifiers. For example, bestimmt, eigentlich, ganz, and hoffentlich. So again, using little phrases like this is going to get you a really good mark. We've also got things such as frequency adverbs, so how often you do something. Again, they're very easy to put into your writing. Examiners really like it when you sequence your essays properly, so make sure you use a variety of linking words. Have a look now, pause on the screen, choose your favourite ones and write them down to learn tonight. So now we think about tenses. If you have a look at the mark scheme, this is the mark scheme for the crossover question. So it's question 1 on the higher and question 3 on foundation. You can see that even to get in the lower bracket, you need to have some accurate past tense, future tense and present tense. The present tense will be covered by using opinions, but you really need to make sure that your past and future are right. Otherwise, you risk only getting 1 or 2 marks for your accuracy, and that's something that you can't really get away with on the higher paper. So let's have a look at past tense. Remember that you can start with a time phrase, for example, gestern, letztes Wochenende, letzte Woche, als ich jünger war. You would then need to use a person with haben or sein. Most verbs in the past tense use haben. Let's have a look at some of those ones. So you could say, normally you would say meine Mutter hat, but because we've used gestern at the start, we swap it. So gestern hat meine Mutter. Letztes Wochenende haben wir. If there's more than one person, you put en on it. So last weekend have we. Letzte Woche haben meine Eltern. So it's something that your parents did last week. Als ich jünger war, habe ich. Then you would put the extra information in your sentence and you would make sure that you follow the rules of TOMP. So if you've got a time, an object, a manner or a place in your sentence, you make sure you put them in that order. I'm just going to show you some very basic sentences here. So we're going to go for gestern hat meine Mutter Tennis. Which word might go on the end of that sentence? Letztes Wochenende haben wir Currywurst. Letzte Woche haben meine Eltern ein neues Auto. Als ich jünger war, habe ich in London. Now, none of these sentences are finished because we don't have the past participle yet. That's the something word. So let's finish these off. If you want to guess what the ending might be, you can pause and guess it for yourself, but I'll run through it now. So, gestern hat meine Mutter Tennis gespielt. Yesterday, my mum played tennis. Letztes Wochenende haben wir Currywurst gegessen. Last weekend we ate Currywurst, so like a curried sausage. Letzte Woche haben meine Eltern ein neues Auto gekauft. Last week my parents bought a new car. And als ich jünger war, habe ich in London gewohnt. When I was younger, I lived in London. So you've got to make sure that when you're writing in the past tense, you follow this structure. Remember in class, we think of it kind of like a burger, and we've got the haben bit and the gut bit, they are the buns, and then you've got all the info as the contents of the burger. You must have the haben and the past participle bit, otherwise that sentence doesn't make sense. So again, it's worth just learning some off by heart and making sure that even though you're higher, you include some basic ones in your writing to show the examiner, look, I can definitely do this. A nice little thing that you can do whenever you use a past tense, you can add es war to give your opinion. Es war lustig, es war toll, es war stinklangweilig. So as soon as you've used past tense, throw in an opinion just to get yourself some extra points. As a higher candidate, you want to show that you know some irregular past tense as well. So some of the ones that use sein, some of the movement verbs. So let's just set up this grid again and I will show you how I would change that. So this time we're using verbs that take sein as the auxiliary. So for example, gestern ist meine Mutter. Letztes Wochenende sind wir. Letzte Woche sind meine Eltern. Als ich jünger war, bin ich. Again, I want to put my information in the middle. So, gestern ist meine Mutter nach Berlin. So, yesterday is my mum to Berlin. And then obviously we haven't finished it yet. Letztes Wochenende sind wir zu Fuß. Letzte Woche sind meine Eltern. And this one has no extra information in the middle. Als ich jünger war, bin ich nach Amerika. And let's have a look at the past participles. So we've got gefahren. Gestern ist meine Mutter nach Berlin gefahren. My mum travelled to Berlin yesterday. Letztes Wochenende sind wir zu Fuß gegangen. Last weekend we had a walk, we went by foot. Letzte Woche sind meine Eltern Rad gefahren. Last week my parents went on a bike ride. Als ich jünger war, bin ich nach Amerika geflogen. When I was younger, I flew to America. So make sure you learn some of these stranger ones. And again, if you really want to show that you're a higher candidate, don't just always write about ich. Use some meine Mutter ist, wir sind, wir haben. Use some different people in your writing to show that you know how to do it. And as always, es war total wunderbar. Add in an opinion. So again, here is a higher level model paragraph showing how they use the past tense. This particular candidate was rated really highly in the examiner's report. And you can see, even though they scored really high marks, and this is from a 28-mark question, they have made sure to use a very basic but accurate past tense to show the examiner that they know how to do that. They'd started to write a habe sentence, habe ich, but they've changed it to bin, perhaps because they wanted to show that they understood how to use movement verbs. And they've done the exact same thing that I suggested that you should do by putting an es war straight after, so including an opinion straight after your past tense. So how about future tense? So again, you'd start with a time phrase most likely. So you could have nächste Woche, morgen, im Herbst, that's in autumn, so you could put a season. Nach der Schule, after school. This time we use werden, so wird meine Mutter, will my mother. Werden wir, will we. Werden meine Eltern, will my parents. Werde ich, will I. You've got your information, which still follows the rule of time, object, manner, place. So ein neues Handy, die Hausaufgaben, nach Österreich, Lachs mit Salat. Lachs is salmon with salad. And let's have a look at how we end our sentence. So this time we are not using a gut word, we are just using an infinitive. Infinitives in German are the verbs that end in en, like gehen or sehen or essen or spielen. We just want to use that type of word. So here I've got kaufen because I'm saying next week will my mum a new phone buy. So next week my mum will buy a new phone. Tomorrow we are going to do our homework. In autumn my parents will go to Austria. And after school I will eat salmon with salad. As I often tell you, GCSEs are competitive. You're competing against every other student that takes that paper at the same time as you. So in order to get the higher marks, in order to be ranked above other students, you've got to show off a bit. So instead of just using the future tense, you could use the future but also the conditional tense. This is like in English when you're saying, I would do this if this. I would like to do this if I could this. So it's another variation of the future tense. And we use it a lot in class because often I hear you say, in der Zukunft möchte ich. So I know that you know this one. I know that this one's quite natural. So again, we can start with a time phrase. A really good one to use is wenn ich viel Geld hätte, if I had lots of money. Or wenn wir viel Geld hätten, if we had lots of money. And then you would use würde instead of werde. Möchte, würden, möchten. So always adding en if you're talking about more than one person. Of course you would add your information in the middle. And then just like with future tense, you're adding an en word at the end. So the sentences I've got here say, if I had lots of money, I would I would invent a new spaceship. So a little bit out there, but maybe you want to put something like that. If I had lots of money, I would like to film a film. I would like to create my own film. If we had lots of money, my parents would buy an island, eine Insel. And the final one, if we had lots of money, we would like to do a world trip. So like we would like to do a trip all around the world. So again, these are really great sentences. Just memorize your favorite one, memorize the easiest one, and see if you can get it into your writing, because it will definitely impress the examiner. So you have to include some aim high phrases, especially as a higher candidate, and especially on question 2. Question 2 on the mark scheme says that you should be using creative and complex language, even to get the lowest mark. So you've got to use some of these. These phrases have been given to higher and foundation candidates, so we would expect that higher candidates would use a lot of them. Have a look through now. Choose some, write them down, pause the recording, and make sure you know them and use them in your exam. As I've said before, question 2 is all about being creative and complex. Have a look at these phrases. They are very high level. Even if you just manage to use some of the smaller ones, such as wie gesagt or ehrlich gesagt, this will look really good in your writing. But if you can memorize some of the longer, more quirky ones, then you're really going to stand out. Here is some more creative and complex phrases and some idioms. Idioms are fun phrases to use, and they show that you've got an interest in the cultural side of German. So I definitely recommend learning some of these bizarre phrases and using them in your writing and speaking. So remember, the keywords are creative and complex. If you've used some of the previous phrases, then your grammar will be looking very complex. Now, when it comes to creative language, it would help if we looked at each topic and we found some alternative words to the ones that everyone uses, such as Fußball and pommes and pizza. We don't really want to be using these if we're higher candidates, because we want to show that we know a range of more interesting vocabulary. So, theme 1, identity and culture. I've just gone through the examiner's vocabulary list, and I've come out with the more bizarre phrases. So instead of saying that you do football, you could say that you do archery, or you could say that your favorite thing to do at home is DIY. Instead of just describing your friend as funny, you might want to describe them as jealous or adventurous, something a little bit more unusual. And instead of talking about eating chips, you could talk about eating seafood or a hard-boiled egg, because that's something a bit more unusual that a lot of candidates won't have remembered. Theme 2 is local area and holidays. So again, I've collected some strange words from that topic, ones that we don't see so often. I thought it might be easy for you to use seaside resort if you're talking about Bognor. Theme 3 is all about school. So again, you've got things like a core subject, an optional subject, whereas you know that other people's will just stick to very basic things like ich studiere Mathe. You could put something more interesting. Theme 4 is future plans, jobs. A lot of these words you might have seen in class when we've done our vocab tests, but I've tried to pick some of the more unusual and bizarre ones. I think using something like a charity sale in aid of something, that would be really interesting, because we haven't really seen the phrase zugunsten very often. That could also come in handy for theme 5, which is all about global events and issues. And I found these words. Some of them, again, we've seen them in class, and we mentioned at the time that they're a little bit more unusual. So again, I'm not saying that you should learn every single word on this list. However, you should use them on your checklist. You should learn a few of them to make sure that your writing is creative and complex and different to other students. In the writing exam, some pupils worry about not being able to understand the question. Each bullet point actually links to opinion, past or future. So even if you didn't understand worst case scenario, you would just write an essay that was about the topic that included opinions, past and future. However, if we analyse the past bullet points, you will see a pattern that the same types of questions are used all the time. One common question type is warum. Warum means why. Have a look at how many past bullet points have used warum. It's quite a lot. So if you get a sentence that starts with warum, you know that the examiner is asking you why something. So for example, in this final one here, you've got why is music important? You've got things like why should all teenagers be interested in the environment? Why should young people go to restaurants? Why are hobbies important? Why are friends important? Important is a very common word to come up in here. Why do you like this festival? Why do young people need a role model? So you've got all kinds of topics that could come up, but they're all using the word why. So make sure that you know your question words before you go into the exam. Warum, why. Another really common question type is was. Was meaning what. Let's have a look at all the different ones that have come up in the past. Was du gestern in der Pause gemacht hast. Was oder sie letzte Woche für dich gemacht hat. Was für Pläne du für deinen Beruf gemacht hast. So you can see we've got a real list. In this question, there are even two was questions in the same one. So what your hobby as a child was, what hobby you had when you were younger, and what hobbies you have now. Again, there's a really long list here. You can see that lots of questions in the writing exam have started with was. Sometimes you've got ones like this about an exchange partner. Was Martha mitbringen soll. What Martha should bring with, what she needs to bring with her on her exchange trip. This one, what here is particularly worth seeing. So what in your town is particularly worth seeing. What you recently for the environment have done. So lots of different sentences. If you feel like you need more practice with this, you can pause and you can try and translate all of these so you feel comfortable that you probably have seen the same type of bullet point that you will get in your exam. Another really popular question type is V questions, how questions. So you can see again another really long list. This is a very common one to get. So again, if you see the word V, translate it as how. For example, in this first one, how long is your school day? How was your last trip to a restaurant? How will your life be in 10 years' time? Again, a very, very popular type of question. And these question words are not as common, but they still definitely come up. So look out for welche, which. So welche Sportarten du treibst, so which type of sport you do. Welche positiven Sachen diese Person gemacht hat, so a positive thing that someone did. Welchen Beruf du haben möchtest, which job you wanted to do. Wer questions are all about who, so we're looking for a person. So who is your best friend? Who is your role model? Sometimes you get wann questions, when. So you've got to give a time or, a season or a month. So when is your favorite festival? When does the exchange begin? And quite often you could see ob questions, which just means whether. So whether school sport is important, whether it's important to do sport at school. Whether having only one environment week in your school is enough. That one's very specific. Or whether you've already participated in an exchange. So look out for these question types as well. As I said previously, I would personally complete the questions in this order because I need to really try hard on question 2 to use many complex and creative turns of phrase, and I want to make sure my grammar's really good. I would always look at both questions, have a look at the topics, have a scan over the bullet points and see if there's one that seems easier than the other or one that I know more about. When I've picked my question, I would start by looking straight away at the bullet points to find out which one is past tense, because past tense is normally quite easy to spot because you've got letzte or you've got gemacht, something like this. I would then find my future tense, looking for something like nächste or Pläne or werde, something like that. And then my 2 left over are going to be opinions. Let's have a look at this sport question. You can pause it if you want to try to do this for yourself. So again, I would start by looking for the past tense. So it's going to be this one because it's like war, like es war toll. But in this one, it's saying why I was at this sport festival, sport event. And then I would look for future tense. That one's pretty easy because it's got next. And then I've got 2 opinion phrases. These ones actually use like welche and ob. So these use some of the kind of rarer ones to come up. So that's why it's important to make sure you know all of those question words. Once I've done this, I can decide which one I'm going to be able to do a stronger answer for. So for the purposes of this, I've chosen the restaurants question. So I've already written next to each bullet point the type of answer I need to give. And now before I start writing, I do a plan. My plan is actually just my checklist. So I look at the bullet points and I write an appropriate checklist that I think I would be able to use to actually get good marks for this question. So for example, I've put about past tense, I put wir haben something gegessen, es war. And I could put something like echt lecker, it was really tasty. Es war ekelhaft. I quite like to tell a story where something bad happens because I think it's quite memorable, especially if it's about a restaurant and I complained that it was really disgusting and the food was horrible. I think that's quite funny for the examiner to read about. Großartig. So es hat mir sehr gut gefallen. I had a really good time. So I'm just putting ideas. Ich esse gern. I've coloured these green because these are all kind of basics. They're opinions, they're past tense, they're future tense. But because I'm a higher candidate, I've tried to pick a higher level of basic. In a box, I put some linking phrases. I really like this one, unter vier Augen. Literally, it means under 4 eyes. But it's like in English when you say between you and me. You know, so it's kind of like you're sharing a little secret with the reader. So I really like that one. I would also make sure I list my aim high phrases because as a higher candidate, I know that this is going to be really important. So again, I've tried to use some of the more bizarre ones. I've tried to use some idioms like Leben ist kein Ponyhof. I think that one's quite a funny one to use. And just over here, I'm putting some of the more creative language that I know that I think I might be able to use in this question. So this is my plan. I gather this all together here. If I've revised, if I've prepared, I will have a really strong plan, and then the writing part should be quite easy because I'm just putting all of these phrases together in a coherent way. So let's just have a look at an example for this bullet point. Wie dein letzter Besuch in einem Restaurant war. So how was my last visit to a restaurant? So I've written this based on my checklist. You can see that I've used a lot of my favorite words and phrases here. Imagine that now I've finished my question and I need to do my final checks. So this was the list that I mentioned before where I'm checking through and I'm making sure that I've definitely done what I need to get the marks. So here, look, you can see that I've clearly used past tense. Here again, I've used another past tense just in case I made a mistake with the first one. I've also put an opinion. And I've used vile, but have I used it properly? We'll come back to that in a moment. So I call words like vile and das, I call them spiky words because when I'm writing them, I draw a spike around them to remind me to send the verb to the end. We can see here that I actually haven't sent the verb to the end because I've put because everything was too spicy. The word was is the verb. War should be at the end of that sentence. So by doing my final check, I can correct that mistake. So that's the kind of thing you need to look straight away for. Look at words like vile and das. I've used ohne Zweifel, so without a doubt. And have I swapped the person and verb or have I just gone ohne Zweifel, ich bin? I have actually swapped that around, so that's really good. Here I can tick off just using past tense, and I've put a gut word at the end of the sentence. Here I've used future tense, and I've put an en word at the end of the sentence. And also I've used aim high phrases, so I've put a shooting star for those, so I've used and zu. I've used the idea was my mum's, not mine. That was a really nice sentence that I learned off by heart. Between you and me, under 4 eyes. Spicy, and I used seafood. I didn't just use boring words like pommes, lecker. I used something a bit more interesting. I used ohne Zweifel. So yeah, I've definitely got lots of examples of high level phrases. So if I hadn't have done that final check, I might have left that big mistake with vile, but overall I've got a really strong paragraph here. So I apply these checks to the rest of my essay to make sure I'm going to get good marks. So that's it. Remember, there really are no tricks in the exam. The examiner just wants to see that you can use opinions, past tense, future tense, and aim high phrases, and they want to see that you've got a good understanding of German word order. We have got to aim for around 32 marks out of 60 for a grade 7. Any marks you can get higher would be absolutely fantastic, so really go for it and use all of your favourite phrases in this exam. Good luck!